the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Yep, Ryan's had, so 2 Como, and didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but some. So ready to roll for this podcast and talk about the worst loss of the Heupel era.
Is that official? Are we claiming this is the worst loss of the Heupel era?
You have to.
Okay, make the case. Why is this the what? Ryan's going to push back on this. I'm going to see, but Jack, why is this the worst loss in the Heupel era?
I guess I should have done more research, more numbers to back it up, because I'm sure I could find some. But I know it's the lowest points.
Yep.
Total he has scored while at Tennessee. I'm pretty sure it's the largest point differential. South Carolina's 25. So,
yeah, it is.
Yes, the most points Tennessee's lost by under Josh Heupel. And yeah, the magnitude surrounding the game is not the same as South Carolina, but with the way Tennessee lost, just bad defensively on the road again, and offense couldn't move the ball. If it wasn't for the most improbable touchdown they've scored this season, they get blanked. So, and it happened to a Missouri team that, I just feel like Tennessee should have been able to beat. I don't know. I can see the argument for South Carolina, but there are a lot of other circumstances that kind of happened in that game with Hendon and, all the drama that is still, we don't know, but all that side of the story too. So I put this as the biggest loss of the Heupel era.
Well, I think it's fair to, Ryan, when you look at that with what Jack's pointing out here, is that I think the difference, and I think there's like some revisionism about what happened at South Carolina last year, where the offense was moving fine. Like, the offense was shredding South Carolina, and they were in that game in the fourth quarter before Hendon went down with the torn ACL. And I understand. Part of it was just the defense was so bad. South Carolina wasn't slowing down Tennessee, like, offensively.
No, but Tennessee was down 2 possessions.
Sure, but like, things could happen because this Tennessee team can score in a hurry. You never know, like with the Tennessee offense.
They didn't get to stop the whole game, so it's mathematically possible. They didn't get to stop the whole game, and they would have had to get one and score every possession just to get the game into overtime.
Right, but this one, you look at both sides of the ball, where it's a collective failure just about everywhere you look. Like, this is one where, like Jack said, 7 points, lowest of the Heupel era. I don't think I ever thought we would see a 7-point game from the Heupel era. I didn't have that on my bingo card at all. He used the word disappointed a lot in the post-game presser. You were on the grounds, Jack. What was it like? What did it look like post-game, and just how demoralized did it kind of seem? And do you have real concerns about how this permeates over into the next 2 weeks for Tennessee's football team?
I'll answer the first part first. Certainly deflating, right? And I think you saw a lot of anger after Alabama, and it was not that way. There was hardly any anger from Heupel. I got that sense. It was just, like, as he was saying, disappointment and deflation. It was just, just lifeless, I guess is a word you could use too. He was coach speak. He was answering the questions just, by the book, but outside of that, not much to offer. And then the players, there was a healthy gap between the end of the game and when they talked to the media. So I thought they were pretty good, all things considered, and, taking accountability and all that stuff. As far as moving forward in the next couple of weeks, that's a question I don't think I can answer. I'm very curious to see what Tennessee does to bounce back from that. You have Georgia coming to your house. You can spin that as a good thing, or you can spin that as a bad thing. And I think there's arguments for both, but that's probably what I'm keeping, obviously, the closest eye on heading into next week is just how they respond from something like that.
Do y'all remember what the line was for Tennessee, Georgia 2 years ago at home?
I do not.
Let's see if I can find it on ESPN, but I don't. One thing I will say on the deflation aspect of it, I thought our Rocky Top Insider, like the pin photo for Heupel's press conference was like, just had that vibe. And so he's just like, he's sitting down, which he's standing up most of the time in these post-game press conferences. And he's just, in this one, he's just sitting down, he's slumped, and he's like looking down. And very, very deflating. It felt like, obviously I wasn't there, but I felt like Jack did a good job of painting the picture of what he sounded like and looked like talking about it.
And I think this is kind of uncharted waters. The difference with last year was Tennessee got up. I mean, Hendon was gone, and they had a reason to fight, right? Like they wanted to finish it out strong for Hendon. Hendon was obviously on the sideline for the following week. He was still with the team. He was still a heavy part. And you also could spin it as like, hey, Jeremy Banks wasn't there defensively. That happened. We'll clean that up the following week. But like, I don't know where you go to get up off the mat now because you have nothing to play for down the stretch. You have a Georgia team that just made a top 10 team in Ole Miss look like they just didn't belong in the same stratosphere as Georgia. But then on the flip side, we've seen this before with Heupel's teams at Tennessee. They can look really, really bad on the road in the SEC, and they haven't lost a home game since Georgia in 2021. So it's like it's so hard for me to balance like how much you should be panicking as a Tennessee fan down the stretch here when you consider that you're at home the rest of the way and you've been really, really good at home to this point in the Heupel tenure. And I mean, it's a difference between 8-4 and 9-3 potentially these last 2 weeks. But I mean, I don't know. I've gone back and forth on this sentiment of like how much panic and how much you should read into the disappointment. And Ryan, you talking about how he was sitting and the disappointment. I think they were just stunned to get obliterated on both sides of the ball. That to that extent, I don't think Heupel could have ever foreseen a second half like that. And I can understand where things were looking really good when Jaylen Wright before the Jaylen Wright fumble, right? Like you had some really bad luck where the offense only has 3 plays in the first quarter. You're like, what are the odds of that happening again? Like we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. That's not going to happen again. But then to just have that kind of swing and to lose the middle 8 in that way, I think was kind of stunning for Heupel to see it go that way, and then the defense not to have their head in the game and just to allow Schrader to get the team back into field goal range right before the kick, and you're just like, oh, this might be over. Like that was like one of those where you're like, we've seen how Heupel's teams have come out in the second half in the SEC on the road. They haven't been good. It's been an issue for years now. I don't know how much we can pull from it, but I understand fans who are extremely concerned about how this rest of the season goes. And I also understand the people who are like, hey, we're back at home and I've seen this team bounce back at home in a strong way. And also, if you had told anybody before the year, hey, it was 8-4 or 9-3 for this Tennessee team and a gap year with Joe Milton and company, I think most fans probably would have been okay with that, right? But then you actually see it play out and you're like, oh, this is what 8-4, 9-3 could look like sometimes, where it's just you have some really ugly losses, some second halves that should not have happened. You lose in a rough way to a bad Florida team. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm just kind of I'm still all over the place, as you can see 24 hours out.
Yeah, I think
that... Go ahead, Jack.
I was just gonna say, and this is across the sport, and I feel like you see it a lot this year, where it's hard to. College football is far from an exact science, and it's hard to make sense of a lot of trends you see. Like, hey, Oklahoma State won Bedlam, but then they get absolutely shellacked 45-3 to UCF. So much of it is hangover and teams getting up to play a team. I think Missouri was fired up to play Tennessee. Yeah. And, given what Eli Drinkwood said directly after the game, you could tell it was a little bit personal for him yesterday. And maybe Tennessee was just a little lackadaisical. This could be a game where Tennessee really gets up, and I think that would be huge credit to Heupel if we see them play with a lot of intensity next week against Georgia. But it could also be very deflating. I could see it going one extreme to the other. I don't know which one's going to happen, but as someone who's looking at this Tennessee program and hoping it doesn't spiral completely, you at least want to see Tennessee come out with that edge of, hey, we have nothing to lose next week.
And no pressure. Definitely. It's not like there's just a bunch of 5-stars and big-time recruits on campus this weekend.
That's just, you can't, you just can't. I mean, I don't really think about any of that stuff when I'm.
Yeah, I don't put much stock in. Yeah. Recruits don't commit because teams play well in games they go to visits. I mean, I get the general momentum standpoint as a whole, but I don't think it matters that a bunch of recruits are going to be there from that standpoint. I will say, Chase, to your point, Tennessee was 19.5-point favorites 2 years ago, and they opened as 9-point favorites this season. Obviously, I think that line's already moved north of 10. But it's viewed as a much more even game. And it's one that it's what we've said all year. Like, Georgia's not, I don't know, maybe they will be, but there's a lot of things to point to Georgia not being very revved up for this game. And that plays to Tennessee's advantage. I think Brock Bowers being back puts a lot of, I don't know, is what the word I'm looking for is, but it's kind of a muzzle on the optimism of Tennessee truly being able to pull off the upset. But Georgia's killed 2 straight teams. I mean, Tennessee was so lifeless yesterday. Like, Kirby Smart shouldn't even show his team the Missouri-Tennessee game tape. Like, that's not what he should do this week. So I'm with you. I think I could going in 2 radical directions. And I think to the point you said, like, most fans would have been fine with 8-4, 9-3. I think most fans would have been okay with 9-3, and I think 8-4 lesser. And that's why I think this game, you say this game doesn't mean anything, or they're not playing for anything. And I get what you're saying. They're eliminated in the East, and I know the Tennessee players don't think this way, but man, they haven't been playing for anything since they lost in Gainesville. I mean, the season achieving anything was over from that point, from a championship, winning the East perspective. And I know the players don't think about it like that until it's really dead, but I think there is certainly a path to Heupel being able to get his team fired up and buying into Georgia. I mean, they haven't lost in 27 games. They're the best program. I know they might not be number 1 in the country, but they're the best program, and I think they're still the best team in the country. So I definitely agree that it could go very dramatically one way or the other. I'm just not sure I'm completely buying Tennessee's players are they don't have anything to play for now because they can't win the East. Well, they didn't have a chance to win the East in any realistic sense after they lost that Florida game.
I'm maybe most nervous just the injuries. Like Dante Thornton, I don't know what the update is there, but he finally breaks through and has a big touchdown, one of the best touchdown catches. I mean, him and Squirrel, both unbelievable touchdown catches this year for Tennessee. I mean, you're really, really thin now at wide receiver, and obviously the strength with Georgia this year is not their front 7. It's been their back end with Lassiter, with Starks, and those guys where you have a very inexperienced group now out wide, and I think they're going to have a lot of trouble separating and really creating any kind of havoc on the perimeter against Georgia, even at home. And we saw, the Jaylen Wright does he bounce back? Like, I worry about that. I mean, the fumbles, he hasn't had that issue in a while, but I mean, he was definitely not himself after the fumble, and then really wasn't used in the second half going from there. So is he able to get back into good graces? Like, is there concern there? Because then you're just in dire straits against Georgia. If Jalen's not able to shake off Como and bounce back, and this team's not able to trust themselves to run the football even at home, I don't know. Then you're really looking at a dark scenario at home.
Yeah, I do think Georgia's rush defense is gettable. I don't know any numbers off the top of my head, but it just feels like they have not been the same rush defense they've been in the last 2 years. And I am confident in Tennessee's ability to bounce back. And, one guy that's certainly going to be hungry next week is Dylan Sampson. It wasn't quite the Florida game. He had more than 0 touches, but he wasn't utilized that much against Missouri at all. So I would expect, him to see maybe a little bit more workload next week and try to do a lot with it as, opportunities for the remainder of the season. Look, these guys only have 3 more games to play, so they know that.
For sure. Biggest moment of the game for you, Ryan Schumpert, was what?
Just the sequence right before the half where, as bad as Tennessee played, like you put it some on bad luck, and it is like kind of bad luck, coincidental, like odd, quirky. Quirky is how I describe it more than bad luck. Tennessee had the ball for 3 plays, so they went 3 and out, and Missouri got 5 straight third down conversions the next drive. Like, that wasn't unlucky. That was Tennessee's not being able to get Missouri in the 3rd and long, and not being able to get off the field on 3rd and short and 3rd and intermediate. But after all of that, they're staring down at the very least, seemingly tying the game with a field goal before getting the ball to start the second half and potentially taking the lead. Like, Tennessee was thoroughly outplayed.